What's happening with Google? Is it really folding up its Chinese operations? The internet giant planning to stop censoring results on its Chinese site, and that may lead to shutting down the service. FBR Capital Markets analyst Heath Terry is with us now. A little bit more on why Google is threatening to leave China. Heath, so glad to have you with us here in the newsroom. Thanks for joining us. You were in the studio, in the newsroom just a few moments ago. We were speaking with an FT reporter, Ben McClanahan, and he made the point, revenue-wise, if Google pulls out of China, it's really not that big of a deal to their bottom line.
Absolutely. I mean, this is when you've got to do this. You've got to do it when it's not as important financially, and when, honestly, for Google, this is at a decision point where they've got to decide whether to commit more resources to China or to make this decision.
Yet it seems to be very extreme, and we're talking about China as the land of opportunity. I mean, for the past few years, investors have spoken almost of nothing but getting into China. So does it make Google look bad if they talk about pulling out?
Google has always been a company that, at least from the outside, has been about their ethics, their morals. I mean, from the very first founder's letter about don't do evil,
which was a very famous line.
Absolutely. This was a big part of what the company's about, and I think they're one of the few companies that can kind of stand up and take this moral ground of saying, you know what, we're just not going to be part of this anymore.
And just let's review, I guess, the context, right, is that the Chinese government, the accusation anyway, is that they want to block emails that have the words human rights or make an allusion to human rights issues from Gmail.
Right. I mean, this started way back when they insisted on filtering results, and it kept going forward, filtering YouTube, and it's just gotten to the point where this is taking it too far for Google.
Because Ben from the FT did make the point as well. Other countries have insisted on certain filters, and Google has gone along with it. So now it's gone too far. But do you really think Google is going to pull out, or are they just kind of starting the conversation?
I think it's exactly that. I think they're starting the conversation. If they have to pull out, they'll pull out. But I think, the Chinese government realizes how bad it would look for them if Google pulls out of the country. I think the Chinese consumers have grown to be able to trust Google, as Ben mentioned. You've seen market share for Google climb very steadily in China, despite the fact that you've got some very big entrenched competitors there. And so, imagine taking Google away from U.S. consumers, they wouldn't be happy about it. And this is just going to put that much more pressure on the Chinese government from those Chinese consumers.
It seems like the Chinese government has to decide which is more important, looking business friendly or acting, I guess, as they see it, in their own best interests.
Right.
Political interests.
Exactly. I mean, at some level, this is about privacy. It's about human rights. It's about all of these issues, and it's also not too far from what you saw in South Africa, back in the 80s, where at some point companies just had to stand up.
Heath, you mentioned that Google is one of the only companies with this much power. Is Google doing a service to the U.S. administration by throwing down the gauntlet like this?
There's certainly a component of that. I don't think Google sees it that way. I think they see themselves as doing more of a service to the Chinese consumer, the Chinese population, than necessarily helping out the U.S. government. But certainly on some level, this does help the U.S. government.
All right, Heath, thank you so much. Heath Terry, an analyst there with FBR.